and welcome to So Easy. Today we're going to look at the wrap dress. It's one of the most popular patterns we've had on So Easy and been downloaded thousands of times, and I've seen some really beautiful examples. However, it is in the one particular style. It's knee length, wraps over at the front, and we're going to just make some slight changes to that today because I want to update it a little bit for summer this year. So I want to give it some flutter sleeves with a little bit more volume to them, and I also want to make it into a maxi dress. And we'll look at the skirt a bit later, but let's start with the sleeve. This is the sleeve pattern, and I've folded my sleeve pattern in half to find the center line and marked it. I've used a large Sharpie so you can see my lines nice and clearly. So I've marked in the center, and then I've marked where the curve is just here, a couple of inches in from either end, because this part here is going to be under our arm. We don't want to add too much volume there. We want to add the volume across the top of the arm and the sleeve. So on either side of this center line, I've then used the width of my ruler, which is about 1 inch, and I've drawn extra segments on either side so that it's symmetrical. And what we're going to do is give the sleeve some more volume, so we're going to spread this out, and it's going to be a little bit of pattern hacking. So you'll need some paper to work with. I buy this paper in a great big roll. It's actually designed for putting on massage tables or doctors' medical tables and things, and I'll provide a link where you can find this on Amazon. It's really cool because you can see through it, as you can see, but actually it's strong enough that if you make up a pattern or use it for like almost a muslin, you can sew with this and then try your pattern on and tissue fit, and I'll do that quite regularly as part of my design process. So I'm going to use this one to expand our pattern. So let's put our sleeve pattern on the top, and we need to expand it, but we don't want to expand it along the curve just here because this curve fits into our pattern as it is, so we only want to expand it along the bottom. So I'm going to cut up through these lines but not cut all the way to the top. I want to just leave a little bit uncut up at the top just here, because this is going to be the hinge that I'll use to expand out the pattern. So now I'll cut these other lines, again not all the way to the top. And same on this side, because obviously we want our sleeve to be symmetrical with lots of flutter over the top. Oh, I've got a little bit come adrift here, so I need to just tape those pieces back on, and I'm going to put them on so they're the correct length. So that's here and here. Okay, now it's time to start spreading our sleeve and add the volume. So to do that, I'm going to start, give myself plenty of room to work, and just put some tape up at the top just here. This will be our fixed point, and we'll spread out from there. So we want to spread things evenly. So if I just add it out just a little bit, we'll maybe want it to come out something like this in the end. So we probably want maybe 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch between each of the little snips that we've cut. So let me put down, I'll take down this one as our starting point, and then we'll move these ones out using this little hinge up at the top, and I'll use my ruler to just to make sure they're going to be even. So I'm measuring between these 2 points at the bottom and adding in a gap of 3/4 of an inch, and then I'll tape it in place. Same on this side, I'm going to add in 3/4 of an inch. And tape it in place. And so I'll keep going. It's going to get a little bit out of shape at the top. Let me just release that tape now to keep it flat. So again, I'll do the same here. About there. same on this other side, add in around 3/4 of an inch, about there. And then as I come out to these, maybe not quite as much because I don't want as much volume under the arm. So here maybe I'll just add 1/2 inch. And 1/2 inch here. And 1/2. And then our last 2 points. Okay, so we've now got quite a strange looking wing shape. I'm just going to fold that tape in under at the top. So we've kept as far as possible this length exactly the same, and of course where it was quite curved before, now it's flattened a little bit as part of our spreading out. But I'm going to tape this down a little bit more securely up at the top just here, and then we'll draw around and we'll get our new pattern piece. So everything's now taped in place, and I'm just going to take my marker again and draw around so that we get our new piece. We've kept the length along the top, we've kept the same under the underarms just here, so this seam is unaltered. And we'll take that up over the top. There's a couple of little bumps where my tape is. There we go. I can smooth that out afterwards. And now the same along the bottom. This part here is unaltered, here and here. And then we just need to create a curve between these lines because obviously we've added some points, so it looks a little bit jagged. But I'm just going to gently curve those out to make a smooth edge along the bottom. And that is now our new pattern piece for the flutter sleeves. So I can cut this one out and put this aside. Now we have our skirt piece, and we're going to do something similar with this. At the moment it hits up at the waist here with the elastic, and it's around knee length or just above knee here. But we're going to want to extend this so that we can make it into a maxi skirt. So the first thing to do is measure yourself. How long do you want your skirt to be? So take your waist measurement down to the floor, and remember to add on a couple of inches. You'll need a 1/2 inch up at the top here for a seam allowance, and you'll need, give yourself a couple of inches down at the bottom so that you can turn up a hem and just make sure everything's level later on, and make a note of that measurement because we're going to be using that now. So we're going to work in a bit of a larger scale this time with the skirt, but our procedures will be really the same as we did with the sleeve. You need 2 measurements. First, the one we've described, the length of your skirt, and then also you need to know at the bottom of the skirt how wide you need the flare to be. The skirt on the wrap dress is fairly straight, and if we just carried it straight on down, the bottom of the skirt would be as wide as your hips, which means you would only be able to take like tiny little steps. You wouldn't be able to walk properly or to walk upstairs. So if we're going to make the skirt longer, we also need to make it wider. So we'll work on that. So I've taken a second measurement. If you've ever made the perfect maxi skirt that's described on the site, I described there how you need to take a big step and then put a measuring tape all the way around your ankles, front and back, and measure that distance. So assuming you're going to take a big stride, you're running after the kids, running for the bus, whatever you need, or you're going to walk upstairs, you'll be taking your legs wider than hip distance when you walk. So measure all the way around your ankles, and my length was 41, the distance all the way around my ankles was 48. So the first thing we need to do is to tape our pattern piece to a much larger piece of paper, and I've already done that here. I've used the same tracing type paper that we used before, and I've put it on to 41 inches length because that's how long I want my pattern piece to be at the end. And I've taped the the skirt here where it says cut on the fold. I've put that on the edge of the paper because we're going to preserve our pattern, you know, from that point and flare on outwards. And then I've taped it to a piece of paper which in total is 41 inches long. Okay, so our second one is to start tracing this side. So I've taken my long ruler, and where the edge of the pattern is here for the existing edge of the skirt, I've just taken my ruler and extended that all the way down to the bottom of our piece of paper over here. So now I've got my skirt piece but elongated to the length that we need. So the length is now right. Now we need to start to extend it to make it wider. So we're going to use the same slash and spread method that we used for the sleeve, and we're going to do the same for the skirt. So I've drawn a couple of lines. I've taken it from the center fold and drawn a line top to bottom, including the skirt extension, 3 inches from the fold, and then I've done another 3 inches, and I don't need to add too much volume, but if you find when you that you need to add more volume because you're taller, you have a longer stride, then by all means add another slash mark over this side too, but 2 is going to be enough for me. So now I've measured across the bottom of the skirt as it exists at the moment, following my extension, and that comes at around 11¼ inches. Now remember that we have a 1/2 inch seam allowance over here, so if I mark my 1/2 inch and then measure again, I get 10¾ Now what I do need is 48 inches wide, and because this is 1/4 of our skirt, we need to divide that by 4. So mine comes out at a nice round 12 inches. I need the bottom of mine, excluding the seam allowance, to be 12 inches wide. So this figure that we came up with, the 48 inches divided by 4 is 12. This is the minimum that the skirt would have to be at the bottom for you to walk comfortably. So I've just checked on the fabric that I'm thinking of using, and it's 54 inches wide, which is a little bit wider than the 48 that I come up with. So what I think I'm going to do is actually add a little extra volume to mine, so it's over and above the minimum, and it will add a little bit more flare to the bottom of the skirt and use my fabric to its best advantage and use the whole width of that. So I'm going to add a little bit more. So we're going to start from exactly the same as we did before. We'll start at the bottom and cut all the way up these slash marks from the bottom to the top, not all the way through though up at the top. Remember, we need to leave that little hinge. So I'll cut those pieces, and then I'll take my roll and I'm just going to stick down at the top and the fold here onto a new piece of paper, and then we'll be ready to spread like we did with the sleeve. So I've got my pattern taped out now onto the piece of backing paper, and I've just done a few quick sums. If my fabric is 54 inches wide and I want to use the whole of the fabric, then I need to divide that by 4, because I'm going to use this, which is my 1/4 pattern piece, gives me 13½. The measurement at the bottom of the pattern down there before I started was 11¼ the difference 2¼ so I only need to add 2¼ inches to the bottom width of this pattern piece in order to add the difference to make it up to 54 inches, and that's going to be more than the 48 that I needed, so I know that I'm going to be fine at the bottom. So I'm only going to add 2 slash and spreads. So if I add 2¼ divide that by 2 equals just 1 inch extra in each slash and spread down at the bottom. So let's make a start with that. So here we are down at the bottom of the pattern piece. This is the bottom hemline of the skirt, and I needed to add 1 inch or just a fraction over between each of my 2 slash lines. So I've slashed all the way up the top of the pattern to the waist, smoothed everything out, and I've taped this first piece. This is the fold of the pattern, so I've taped that one and then just pivoted this one out until the distance here between these 2 marks is 1 inch, and I'm now going to paste that pattern so that it matches up here and gives me that 1 inch spread at the bottom that I needed. So I now tape that all the way up to the top. So now here I am, I've cut my second slash all the way up to the waist of the skirt and just spread this second part out too, until again we have our gap here of just a fraction over an inch. It's going to add what I need at the bottom. So I'll tape that in place, tape it all the way up, and you can see where I've just joined the dots here and added those lines in. And now I just need to make sure that everything is taped down to my piece of paper, and I'll cut all the way around the outside, and that is my new pattern piece for my skirt, complete with the extra flare that I need so that I can walk with the longer length. And now we'll get on to sewing our dress. So all my pattern pieces are cut out, and I'm now going to start with the front of the dress. This is the one that has all of the pleats, and I've got the original wrap dress just here. So if we take a look, we have 4 pleats on this wrap over side here, and so we need to replicate that. So I've transferred the pattern markings to the back of my fabric. You may not be able to see them very well, they're in a white chalk, and we need to match up each of these double line sets to make a pleat. So I've done the first one just there and put some pins, and then we have a line just here that comes out to the point and a line just here that comes out to the valley, and these two need to meet. So I'm going to pick those up, put my pin through the point here and out through the point there, and those two need to match up on my pin. I'll put a pin through there to do that, and then if I fold this over we should get a better view. So my peak and my valley should be matching up, and if I put my pin through here it will come up and match the line on the back, and I'll put another one to keep it in place. Okay, that's pleat number 2. Pleat number 3, I'm going to fold it over in half again so that my peak and valley are matching, and as I put my pin through this point on the end it matches the end of the line on the other side. So that's 1, 2, and 3. Those look good, and the same with the last one. Just going to fold that in half, put my pin through those points at the end, that matches well. Match up my peak and valley at that point, and another pin in the middle just to make sure. Now if we fold that out, you can see we've got 4 little peaks of fabric here on the back, and if I gently transfer it over to the front you'll see we've got our 4 pleats of fabric there on the front. So now I need to take this over to the sewing machine, and one at a time, following the pins and the lines that I've got guided here with some chalk on my fabric, I'm going to sew each of these 4 pleats in place one at a time. So that's my first set of pleats now sewn, and I've just given them a light press, and I've pressed the pleats on the back down towards the bottom, down towards the waistband. So let's now work on the pleat on our other front piece. So the other front of our dress has 2 pleat lines just here, squared off against this funny point that we've got in the bottom of the bodice. So we need to match those up. So I'll match them at the top with my pin, through one side, out the other, and then I know those 2 points are matched. And the same down at the bottom here. Take one here, same point there, and again now those 2 points are matched. I can put my pin in place, and then if I fold the fabric, I can see I've not got it quite right because I've got a little pleat in there. It's not lying quite flat, so let me try that again. Okay, and check, and the pin's near enough on that line at the back. That's great. So now I'll just put a few more pins in on that chalk line, and then I'll take this over to the machine. Start up at this point just here where I marked with my first pin going through. That's the end of those lines, and then I'll sew this pleat from here down to this point here, and that will be the pleat in our second bodice piece completed. So now it's time for us to start assembling the bodice. So I've got the front two pieces here. They're not attached, they're just laid face up. This is my back bodice piece, and up at the shoulders just here I've added in some knit stay tape, so I'll provide a link underneath where you can learn more about that. Basically it helps to stabilise the shoulders and stops them stretching out over time. So I'm just going to match these two together, right sides, and we'll match up the front with the back shoulders. And I'm going to sew through those and then just trim and neaten my seams, and we'll do that for both. And the same over here. I don't use many pins on these short seams, they're only short, so a couple of pins will do it just while I move it over to the machine, and then I will sew and come back. So my front and back are now joined up at the shoulders just here, and now I want to work on the front edge and the neckline. I've got a roll of the knit stay tape that I really like to use, so I'm now going to start at one end down here and take the tape all the way up around the neckline and all the way down on the front, so that these panels are all going to be stabilised and we don't get any gaping from the front. So I'll just take the stay tape, put it just inside the edge of the fabric, and I'm going to fuse that in place all the way around. So here's my stay tape now pressed in place all around this neckline edge, and now what we need to do is just use the tape as a guide and fold it over, and you'll get a nice crisp edge all the way along as you fold up to the edge of that tape. And I'll pop a few pins in place, then take it to the sewing machine and just stitch close to this edge so that I get a nice finished edge all the way around the front and back of that neckline. So my neckline edge is now finished all nice, and I've given it a press. Even though we're working with knits, you should still press as you sew, because it really does help to get nice finishes on your seams and edges. So now it's time for us to insert our sleeves. So if I just flatten the sleeve curve out just here, and I have my sleeve, which of course now looks a bit of an odd shape because we elongated it earlier to give it that little bit of extra flair. So I've folded my sleeve in half and found the center and just put a pin, and I'm going to match that up with the shoulder seam just here and pin in place, and then I'm just going to pin that sleeve around this curve. Obviously it's going to lie a little bit strangely, so if I start there, and then I will pin the corners, the points under the arm just here and around the other side. And now I'll just ease that shape of the sleeve there into the shape of the armhole between those two pins, and I'll pin this side and this side, repeat on the other side, and then we can sew our sleeves in too. So now my sleeves are in place, it's time for us to continue working on the assembly of the top. This is the front panel that has the single pleat. This is the bottom just here, and I've laid that out flat on my board, and now I'm taking the other front panel, the other wrap piece, and lying that one on top. This is the one that has the 4 pleats over on the side here, and now we need to join these two together. So I'll start at this point over here, just put a pin, and I'm going to pin up this side where we have the underneath part here. These two are going to join on our side seam. And then the same over on this side. We need to join this pleated area to the side seam just here. So I'll start by matching up at the bottom. Line out smoothly, pin at the top, and then I'll just pin it a few places in between. Hold those two layers together. And then if I pull this out nice and flat and just match these two bottom edges, and I'll put a few pins in here too. And then I'll take this over to my sewing machine, and we just want to baste these two pieces together so that when we work with them later it's going to be easier, because if they're basted they're going to act as one piece rather than two. And if your fabric's a little bit slippery like mine is, then it's not going to be so difficult, it's not going to all slide about. So I'll take it over to the machine and baste along this bottom edge where I'm pinning now, and baste up those side seams just where my pins are until I've got both of these layers secured. So now our bodice is almost complete. Everything's basted at the bottom, so these two are now one layer. So we need to turn things right sides together. And we're now going to match up and sew our side seams. So match up your points under the arm where the sleeve matches the side seam, and pin, and we'll put a little pin in the bottom of the sleeve just here, and we'll match up our side seams and pin those. And if you are pinning everything in place, you may as well try on at this stage and make sure that everything is going to fit you well as well, because now's the time. If you need to make any fitting adjustments, you can do it at this point. So I'll continue to pin both of my side seams, then I'll take it over to my machine and sew them right from the bottom of the sleeve just here down to our waist on both sides, and then our bodice will be almost completed. So here's the bodice of my dress now. Everything's sewn and tried on and it fits beautifully. The only thing I need to do is finish off these sleeves, but I'm going to do those with a twin needle probably at the end when I do the hem, so I'm just going to set my bodice aside for now and start working on our skirt. The skirt is very straightforward, just has two pieces that we drafted earlier, a front and a back, and I'm going to place the two pieces right sides together, pin along the edges, and then just check for fit. Make sure that I'm happy with everything, and then once they're pinned and fitted, I'm just going to sew both sides together like this. So I've got my waist with the curve up at the top just here. I'll match those sides, and then I'll sew the side seams, and we'll have one long tube which is going to be our skirt. So I've sewed the side seams of my skirt and I've tried it on and I'm happy with the fit. It's got plenty of space in the bottom for me to able to take some big strides, walk upstairs, no problem. But at the same time, it's not got too much volume up at the top here around the waist and hip, so it's going to be quite smooth there. So now we need to join the two together. So we need to match the skirt and the bodice waistlines, and of course we need to match them right side together. So my skirt's inside out, my bodice is right side out, and I'm just going to pop the bodice down inside the skirt. Now if you have a preference on yours for which is your front and back of the skirt, then obviously make sure that the front of the skirt is matching with the pleated side on the bodice. Okay, so we now need to just pin these. I'm going to match up our side seams to start with. And the same over on this side. And I'll just stretch those out, make sure they're lying nice and smoothly, and start somewhere here at the centre, pop a pin, and I'll just carry on until I've got it pinned all the way round, front and back, and then take it over to the sewing machine. Now you have two options with the waist. You can add elastic, or you can choose not to add elastic. That's entirely up to you. I'm going to add elastic to mine just because I find that that helps the dress sit properly at my narrowest part at the natural waist by adding the elastic in, and it tends to look a bit more flattering on my shape because I'm a little bit more square through the centre. I don't have much of a waist, so I will add elastic. So I'm going to sew my two layers together, my skirt and my bodice, with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and that's going to give me plenty of room to add elastic into a casing. So I'll do that first of all, and with my 5/8 of an inch seam. If you have decided not to add elastic, then you just sew and finish your seam as usual. If you're using a serger, then you can just go straight round and trim off the extras as you go. So I've now got the casing completed around the waist. Here's my first seam I've sewn on my regular sewing machine, and then I've just neatened the edge with the serger and created a gap between these two, which is going to be the casing for my elastic. So I've just got some narrow elastic with a safety pin on, and I'll feed that through this casing now. If you don't need a casing, you don't need elastic, then you can skip one of these seams and just go with one waist seam, and then trim and neaten your seams on the inside of the dress. So I'm going to do this, thread this elastic through now, and then I'll try the dress on, make sure I get the elastic to a nice comfortable length that I need, and then I'll join it and trim off the rest and just close up this little gap in the casing just here. So that's my waist now completed. The only thing I've now got to do is to try the dress on one final time and check for length. I'm probably going to leave it a little short because I don't want it dragging around if it gets wet here, which it often does in our summer evenings. So I'm going to just check on the length of that, and I'll finish the bottom off with a twin needles hemline. And we've also got to finish off our sleeves. I may try out a few different examples of these with some just pieces of fabric I've got left over. Maybe do like a lettuce edge hem and see how I like the look of that, but it may be too much already on the fact that I've already got an extended flutter sleeve, so we'll see how that goes. I may just finish off with the double needle, exactly the same as I do for the hem on the dress. And that's it. My new tropical summer maxi dress will be completed. I hope you enjoyed following along with the tutorial and hacking your wrap dress pattern to make something just a little bit different. Thank you very much. Hope to see you at So Easy again soon.